What's going on, Tommy? Thanks for coming to the episode, mate. How you doing?
All good, thanks. Thanks very much for having me on here. Nice to chat to you, and look forward to catching up.
You're welcome, mate. One of the first people I had on the list, an absolute beauty, just a sound guy. So yeah, I want to pick your brains, mate, if that's all right. So for the listeners, how about you give us a little bit of an intro? So who are you? Where have you been? What have you done? Those types of things.
Okay, so I'm Tommy Munday. I'm a strength and conditioning coach working at Boxing Science. We're based in Sheffield, just sort of like where Sheffield meets Barnsley. I've been back for about 7 months now. So I've been back working for Boxing Science while I was at university, which is where I'd met you, Jordan. I did an internship for about 3 years with Boxing Science. So I was really, really lucky to work with Danny Wilson and Alan Ruddock. It's two kind of like my really key mentors, which gave me a lot of really good practical experiences and also sound theoretical knowledge while I was at university. After finishing uni and graduating masters, what I did, I ended up moving back home to Macclesfield, so like south of Manchester. And then I was lucky enough to get a job with Manchester Metropolitan University. So I worked for a really sound guy in Daniel Pike. He's another really key mentor of mine. Just a really very, very, very good coach and a really, really good mentor for me. And then Lewis Fox as well. He was also there. He's an outstanding coach as well and really looked after me during my time there. So it was pretty funny. Like on the week before I was meant to start, which was originally like a part-time role working with our student athletes, that became a part-time role working on behalf of the university with Man United's under-21 women's academy team. So as you can imagine, straight away, like growing up being a United fan and stuff, I jumped to the opportunity. That started off on, I think, between 8 and 12 hours a week, and gradually over time, over the next couple of years, added more and more time towards that. And from the start, to be honest, I chucked everything. I tried to treat it as a full-time job straight from the off. Tried to go in as much as I can. Tried to go in as much as I could. Learn off some really, really amazing staff in Charlotte Healy and Lewis Craig, who were two of the coaches. Some amazing physios. Eva Gibson's one that springs to mind. She was outstanding as well, and just tried to soak it all up as much as I could, and ended up over the next couple of years going from kind of 12 hours a week to 24 hours a week in my second season, and then ending up accumulating into a full-time role, which I did for about, I think, only about 4 months in the end. But like I say, the whole time I tried to treat it as a full-time gig. But then a few months ago, Danny's ended up really, really busy with Boxing Science, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware. Him and Alan, the business has just grown and grown. More people coming on the program. The facility they've got now is really, really amazing. It's a great place to be able to call work every day. And he asked me if I'd like to come back and work for him full time. So I jumped at that chance. My girlfriend Anne-Marie, she's living in Sheffield, so it just kind of made sense. So kind of our personal lives and then career, it was kind of like the next step for me. So the 2.5 years I spent with Man United Women's, yeah, like I say, some amazing staff, some amazing players, amazing athletes. I'm really, really proud of the system we built there, and working with Charlotte Healy especially, like was amazing to work as part of a real sort of solid multidisciplinary team, and the work she's doing there and continuing to do. And I'm really excited to see the progression of that program, even on Twitter and stuff like that. So it's good stuff. And then so back working at Boxing Science now and loving it.
Sick. What yeah, I mean, that's good to hear. You know, we caught up after he came back straight away, got a large filter coffee from Starbucks in us, you know, left absolutely sweating with our eyes wide open, caffeined off her head. It's good stuff. What how does your week look at Boxing Science at the moment then? Like, are you kind of typically 9 to 5? Is it all coaching based? Where's your time kind of split?
Yeah, like I say, we've got between 12 and 18 boxers coming through the door each week. So some of them are training anywhere between 2 and 4 times a week with some targeted strength sessions and some kind of targeted aerobic fitness and conditioning sessions, if you will. We're also testing, a lot of boxes. So people use and access the program in completely different ways. Just like I say, some people are training on a really, really regular basis. Some people, they might just come in for testing once per camp, things like that. Some people might come in. We've got a heavyweight, Fabio Wardley from Ipswich. He'll come in maybe once every 3 weeks. He'll come and spend the weekend with us and do two. He
looks like a unit, mate. By the way, yeah, he is a tank.
Very, very, very athletic as well. Like irrespective of his boxing ability as well. And thankfully, he's got the two to go alongside each other. So I think the program is absolutely fantastic for him for getting the most out of him. So in terms of that, yeah, like I say, we've got people coming in on a fairly regular basis. Some people once every 3 weeks, some people once every 10 weeks, some people just off on the cuff testing session. We might never see them again, but we've given them some tools, some recommendations, some resources, what they can take into their own training. Sometimes they'll take them back to their own S&C coaches and things like that. So hopefully try and give everyone a good experience. And then we've got some boxers that we've never even met. So we've got some people from the United States, we've got some people from all over Europe, Australia, who we've never even met. They're working with us on a purely remote basis. So it's pretty much a kind of, I want to say about a 70-30 split between live and face-to-face in-person coaching, and then remote coaching, and then also developing our kind of online remote programs where we're not chatting to sort of the users at all. So people might simply just purchase an online product, which might be our conditioning guide and things like that. So what we're trying to do is develop a program what's accessible to as many people as we can, and people can use boxing science, methodologies, philosophies, all that stuff, however they want, I suppose.
That's sick, mate. You know, and it's I've kind of been around Sheffield Hallam, around Danny pretty early on when he kind of started boxing science with Alan, and you know, to see it grow and to see how he's kind of developed and how the company and the business has really pushed on and taken on this really big educational objective of, you know, regardless of whether you pay us or not, we're going to try and give you some information to go ahead and make really good decisions in your training. And that's awesome to see because, you know, as you'll know, around boxing and combat sports and fighting, money isn't always that thing that people have tons and tons of. So sometimes you are just jumping on YouTube and seeing what you can find in terms of free info. So that's, yeah, it's cool to see. And that kind of segues me quite nicely into, you know, one of my first things I want to kind of pick your brains on is around technology. So you've had this kind of career in football, you've been around Manchester United, you've been around Manchester Met and then boxing science. And I think probably all scenarios there have probably quite a bit of money, have the technology around to back it up. So I guess my question to you to kick us off is, where does technology kind of sit within your programming and in your philosophy?
Yeah. So when obviously you've asked to chat to me the other week, I was like absolutely buzzing, and then almost a bit like, oh, what about anything in particular? And you mentioned like technology. Like, I don't really consider myself like a techie person. Like I'm not great with technology, to be honest. Like, but one thing is, where myself, Danny, Alan will use technology, and some of the things you mentioned, like OptiJump, we'll use velocity-based training, we'll use a push band, like all these different things. What we'll go on to talk about, we'll use them on a fairly regular basis. Like for me, it forms a big part of our program because we have it. So at any moment in time, or wherever we are, wherever I've been, I'm trying to do the best I can with what I have at that moment in time. And one of the things for me is like, I'm trying to make the most optimal decision. And I'll go into what I mean, but the most optimal decision in the kind of like shortest amount of time necessary at any moment in time. So for me, like, I'm making decisions all the time when I'm coaching, when I'm programming. It's like, even like, what are we going to work on for the next 4 weeks? What are we going to do today? are we going to do another set? Am I going to coach this athlete here? Am I going to cue them? Only whether it's in the short, medium, long term, all the time I'm having to make decisions. And if technology or if an item, anything can help me kind of speed that process up and improve the quality of my decision and improve the speed at which I can make it, like I'm all for it. But if that technology doesn't work on a given day, I also ideally want a method to be able to make that same quality of decision and to do the best I can on that day. So, for example, like one of the things with the United program was, and I'll probably like talk about this a fair bit, but we had the first year, so the first 18 months, we had no GPS. And then for the next 12 months, we had GPS all of a sudden. So before that, we built a really good system and we built a really good sort of thing around RPE times duration. So a pretty crude measure of training impulse, but I think a really, really important measure. And then when we had GPS, this was something new. And this was something that I wasn't used to making a decision of, I suppose. So another one might be timing gates. Before we had timing gates, I was using a stopwatch. With a stopwatch, there's a typical error of measurement. One thing we validated this ourselves, and I think there's a pretty pretty robust paper on it, so to speak. But typical error of measurement of about 0.04 seconds. So 4 milliseconds. Yeah, that'll be right. Yeah, 4 milliseconds. So that might not sound too significant over a flying 30-meter sprint, but over a flying 10-meter sprint, that's pretty significant. That's about a 4% kind of potential error. With timing gates, you might be able to get that same level of speed and feedback with that smaller typical error of measurement that you're probably not gonna really have any measurement error, providing you set these things up right. So for me, like, technology forms a big part of our decision-making process in terms of the speed. But if I turn up at Monday and we plan to test someone and the OptiJump's not working, or gym aware's not working, something like that, I still need to test that athlete and I still need to work out how are we gonna get the best out of this athlete. Yeah, exactly. So plan B ideally is going to hopefully be as close to plan A as possible. So
that's a true one there. Just on that, like we've kind of mentioned how technology is really, really useful for programming decisions and day-to-day adjustments and those types of things. And I've been in a few situations where exactly what you said there, the gym aware isn't working, it's not charged, or the timing gates haven't got batteries in and somebody's broken a tripod. And it's like nothing annoys me more as a coach when you kind of say to everybody, right, we've got testing day, it's going to be sick, it's the end of the year, it's going to be big. You turn up and you're like, nail. And you've just got to kind of roll with it on the spot. Yeah. Sorry, mate, I just wanted to jump in with that.
No, I think it's an important thing to think about and having that plan B. One of the big things for the kind of tech is especially if you've got something that can give you feedback there and then live, then it's making these decisions so much faster. But I could test a squad of 20 players, for example, on the OptiJump. I could get everyone counter movement jumps in, probably be confident I could do that in under 20 minutes, potentially 10. If I had to do that with a MyJump app, I could get the same quality of data. I could probably get the same accuracy of data, but I wouldn't be able to give them the feedback live. I might just have to get a video of everyone's. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to go and analyze it later on. For me, for doing just three jumps with a squad of 20 players, which I have done before using the MyJump app, that takes me about 3 hours. So input, output, 3 hours of my time spent looking at that. If I can minimize that to 20 minutes, then you're laughing, aren't you? But if it's not there, can we find another way of assessing that same quality, I suppose?
For sure. I think I've been able to use both in the past, and I think as my current role, I do a little bit of online coaching, I do a little bit of face to face, and I think the preference is always to use the Opto. You know, probably what they'd consider like the gold standard. But how much is it? Like $1.5 grand, $2 grand? I don't know.
I'd imagine so. Yeah, there or thereabouts. I think.
Yeah, it's not cheap. But I do use my jump for a lot of my online guys at the moment, and it's pretty easy in that sense because it's not time sensitive. You know, it's a testing measure. We're not going to make any programming decisions there and then based off that. And if we are, some of the things I've just told the guys to do is, well, you get the app and you just do it yourself, you know, and then you can make that decision. Okay, if you're down by 10%, we're going to adjust in this way. If you're setting PBs, okay, well, maybe we push it a little bit more. So with that, then going to, I guess, when you've got athletes in the gym and you've got a piece of kit, whether it's an Opto jump, timing gates, gym aware, whatever, how do you usually find they engage with technology? Because I know there's a few kind of different, well, I'll let you kind of go. How are the boxers or the footballers, how do they usually kind of react when you're going to get some tech out?
I think generally, I found people love it, and well, that's quite a broad statement to start off with, but I'll probably give a couple of examples. But if we've got a lad trap bar deadlifting and we want him to lift it, I don't know, like 80% of the 1 hour, then say, right, this gym aware, it's going to measure how fast you're going to lift, how fast you're going to lift this barbell. The higher the number, the faster you've lifted it, the better the score. If you've got something to beat, I think it's not only going to drive intent a lot more, and I think there's a lot of good research about kind of augmented feedback and augmented feedback in enhancing adaptation rates. And I'd be confident to say that a 6-week block of VBT feedback versus no VBT feedback, I'd be confident in the athlete that has VBT feedback getting stronger, and I'd also be confident about them enjoying the program a little bit more, because I think it can make what might be a submaximal task a lot more challenging, a lot more engaging. I think for me as well, one of the things I'm really conscious of, like just coaching in general, is cognitive load. So, for example, if we've got someone in the afternoon and they might have been boxing in the morning, they might have had like 7 pieces of information to think about that morning, for example. So they might have think about, I want you to do this with your feet. When you throw this shot, make sure you step to this side. Right? So all these things, technical, tactical, psychological, about pacing, all these things. They might have had 7 pieces of information. That's just a made up number, but they're going to have a lot to think about. If we know that the short-term memory can handle between 5 plus or minus 2 pieces of information, so between 3 and 7. So someone that's might be pretty bright, that might be closer to 7. Someone that might struggle a little bit more to remember things, that might be closer to 3. If they come in the afternoon and then I hit them with another 5, something's going to spill off, whether that's what they learned in the morning or what they worked on in the morning, or whether that's something that we're working on in the afternoon. We know that the working memory, which is like the immediate energy store, the immediate sort of energy store. What's the word I'm looking for? The immediate, like knowledge store, memory store, not energy store. Sorry, memory store. I'd forgotten what the memory
there
store.
It is. Yeah, got cognitive load, mate.
That's it. But we know that can handle about one thing at one time. So am I better to go, right, I want you to do this with your hips, I want you to accelerate through the movement, I want you to do this, and this, or am I better leaving gym aware out and just being, right, I want you to lift this as fast as I can, and letting that be the teaching tool? On something that's a little bit more, that's fairly simple, like a trap bar deadlift or counter movement jump, whatever, like on something that's a little bit more complex and might require a little bit more thinking, even though it's quite a high-brain activity. But I'll use like a footballer that I've worked with for one-to-one for probably about 2 years, Zach Tyson. He's been brilliant because we've measured stuff every single day. So we've got a really good idea of dose and response for him, of what works and what doesn't. and working together over a good couple of years, we've got a really good idea of the exercises, the dosages, the intensities that he responds to versus what he doesn't. But one of the things that I found with him was like when we were going out to sprint, a live GPS unit was the number on that screen of how fast he'd just run was predominantly the main sort of teaching tool. So for him, and it really kind of helped me talking his language as well. So he got significantly quicker over the first 6 months that we started training together. So he went from 32.8 kilometers an hour maximum speed to 35.3. So a pretty decent change over the course of 6 months with an athlete that's pretty quick already. And one of the things that I found myself saying a lot with him was like, right, this is the score you've just got. You've just ran 33. What went well there? And he'd tell me like what went well. And very often, a lot of the time, the things he said was very different to what I might have coached him on. So I might have done like high knees in the warm-up, saying, right, I want you to be really tall, I want you to pop off the floor. Right, we're moving on to scissor runs now, I want you to really attack the ground. But then when I asked him, like, right, what went well there? He might have said, I remember him saying, like, oh, I felt really relaxed, I felt really light on my feet. And that's something that I'd never said to him before. But that was something that I was going to say to him again. And literally, it was what went well there. I was really light on my feet. And I was like, right, great, do that again, but do it twice as much, or do that again, but do it even better. And he goes and runs 33.3. And doing that consistently, like, I wasn't really coaching him, but this app, I was facilitating the session and I was deciding on our volumes and our intensities, on our distances and all that. But the technology definitely enhanced the adaptation and definitely enhanced my coaching and definitely allowed me to make better decisions. And also, I think for him, the decisions about how he was going to attack the next rep or decisions about how he was going to run, that enhanced his decision making as well. And I think with pretty minimal cognitive load, that's like a case study of N=1. But I think we can see the same on a counter movement jump. Like I might tell someone about an arm swing or whatever, but normally if I give him something to think about or I make a technical change, I think James Wild speaks about this when working with athletes. If I give someone something to think about, and whether that's internal or external, then I'm going to probably take up their working memory from what's actually going on in the task. Whereas if someone jumps to 53, right, what went well there? Well, I pushed through the floor really hard. Right, do that again, do it better, and hopefully see the same again. And I think that's where BBT, I think that's where augmented feedback and stuff like that is pretty magic. And if we can keep our cognitive load during our strength training sessions to a minimum, then hopefully we're impacting the program better by taking less time and energy from away other things that they need to think about a lot more, which is the technical and tactical work.
Absolutely, mate. I think what you just kind of mentioned there, just around the first example of track bar jumps and using gym aware and VBT, is I kind of got like a motivation standpoint from that, a way of just really kind of driving intent in a session by getting a specific number at the end of it, and whether we like it or not, intent and motivation is a big driver of whether somebody gets better or not. And we want to try and enhance that when we want to enhance that. Sometimes we might have to pull people back, sometimes we might have to push forward depending on where we are. And then the second example was around how you kind of adjust the session based on that. So giving them, okay, this is the number you got, what went well? Okay, well, let's do that thing again, or let's try something slightly different. So it's, I guess, you're enhancing your coaching ability by using the numbers. With that, you kind of went back. I want to take you back to the Man U example where you said you had maybe 18 months without GPS units and had a really good, system that seemed to work. You was managing player load really effectively. And then you had a 12-month period of introducing this new tech that you said you hadn't used much. Same as me, I haven't used GPS ever. I'm a full GPS virgin in that sense. But what were the kind of instant changes then? Was there like a 6-month period where it was like chaos? Or was it really like something that you could implement straight away and you was like, bang, we're making better progress? What's your thoughts on that?
So a couple of like little anecdotes for me, I think will probably like help me get into the swing of this. But One thing I did at the end of our second season, I did a full review of basically all the data we'd collected. So we used training impulse as our key sort of decision making, and for all its faults, the acute to chronic ratio with alongside the side of training impulse. So like, how long have they played? How long have they trained for? And we'd use ball rolling time, and we'd use timing drills as our main measure of that, because, for example, like a 2-hour session where they have like a 10-20 minute break in the middle where they're resetting or something like that, which does happen, that might not reflect the demands of the full session. Whereas like if we basically looked at, right, how long did we want to spend on each drill? So 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, and 15 minutes. That would typically, that'd be a timing drills time of 60 minutes, and that seemed to really quite nicely reflective our training demands. And that was the equivalent of a football match, because a football match, I think, balls in play for about 55 minutes, there or thereabouts. I might have that wrong, but the timing drills, if you want, is 90 minutes. So that's the equivalent, and kind of represents our training demands, I suppose. So we use that multiplied by RPE, and if someone was spiking, let's say, or dropping too much, that was typically because not we'd done too much or too little, but they'd missed a session, or they might have pulled out, or they might have had something else, or they might have gone up and trained with the first team, things like that. So providing they trained 4 times and then played once, it was pretty consistent. So unless you get massive increases or decreases in RPA, and as long as you're pretty much doing the same stuff all the time, we found our training was pretty steady. Now, when we introduced GPS, we saw a lot bigger variation in what we were doing day to day, and that was kind of like the intensive demands, which is accelerations, decelerations, all that stuff, and extensive demands. What we wanted to look at straight away was the maximal speed of our players, and we wanted to measure that on a really regular basis, because that was something that was important to us. We knew it was kind of a KPI for becoming a senior WSL Man United women's player. We knew the players had to be quick, and our best way of looking at that on a day-to-day basis, we couldn't measure with RPE. So the maximal speed was something like we looked at straight away. From there, I think one of the questions that Charlotte asked me a lot, and she's like brilliant. She's got such a good eye for how a whole performance program should be run, is that she'd ask me like, well, what are the first team doing? What are their training demands, and how can we kind of bridge our gaps? So what are they training like? What are they playing like? And then what are we playing like at under 21 level? And what are we training like as well? So that's a really good conversation around bridging the gap from there, because that's something that RPE can't tell you. So I think for us, technology in that sense was answering the things that we couldn't know, think, or guess, so to speak. One of like the things I found with GPS and using it to modify training loads, so to speak, because I was pretty new to it, was that in theory, if there is a dose and response relationship between doing more, so covering more meters at high speed, covering more accelerations and decelerations, then there should be a dose and response relationship between that and the adaptive response on the body. So does the player get fitter? Do they get faster? So one of the things we found was more high speed exposures and more exposures to time above not only 95% your max speed, but 97.5%. That we found that is like a real kind of key number. More exposures and more time and meters at that seemed to be a driver of maximal speed development. We also found that maximal speed sprinting done twice a week seemed to move the needle on maximal speed development, whereas sprinting once per week seemed to be enough to kind of maintain. And we found that's an example of one of the dose and response relationships we found. one of the other things we looked at was during pre-season, does a player that from week 1 through to, we chose week 1 through to week 7 of pre-season during our second year, do players that run more or cover more total distance in training, do they get fitter? Do they make larger effective fitness improvements than players that run less in training? And you can probably kind of assume from a tone of voice that there wasn't a kind of dose and response relationship between any variable, that's high speed running, total distance, accelerations, decelerations. There wasn't a dose and response relationship between the adaptive response on the body and the and kind of the amount they've done. So in that sense, we might know injury might occur or could occur when the adaptive response from the body is insufficient to the training kind of load applied to it. However, when we looked at RPE, times duration, that kind of training impulse, which we didn't really need too much technology to collect, we saw a moderate to strong relationship. So players that did more training and they trained for more minutes, so that might have been doing extras, that might have been that might have been going up to play with the first team, whatever. Players that did more and found it harder, so RP times duration, there was a strong relationship between those who found it harder and did more and the amount of fitness improvements they made, and that was in our measure of maximal aerobic speed. So that's what we used for that. So my conclusion was that from that was that this kind of internal load training impulse, that's going to be the main driver of our adaptive response. And providing we can build our players up to tolerate it, and we're steady with our increases in training volume, more volume and more intensity in terms of finding it more challenging, that would step up that adaptive response. One of the sort of cusps of that is you can have, I found, just eyeballing the data, but sometimes you can have quite an intense session, let's say, like, and by intense I've meant like, right, we've done about 8K today, we might do 10K in a game, but players can still find it relatively easy. Just it all depends on what you've done and how you've done it in the context of that session. We might have done 4K, but everyone found it an 8 or a 9, and the high speed running demands might have been fairly low because everything was quite boxed in. So I think that looking for a magic number or looking for a magic sort of way of looking at things using external training load, I think it tells you what you did, but not necessarily like how you did it or what is going to happen to the player. So I think it's a really good, I found it was a really good descriptor, and I thought it was really important to look at that stuff, but not without RPE and not to replace RPE, because that was a real eye opener for me. Like, wow, we really need to make sure we're on top of collecting this data, and we need to make sure we don't miss it. And before that point, if I'd missed a players, I'd have put the squad average or something like that. And then from that point, I was like, no, we know this internal training impulse, and not a great measure of it. Not a, like, to be honest, like not the world class most gold standard. But we understood that players that did more and found it tougher, they got fitter. So, and it was that was a real key thing for us. So that just made me kind of sorry mate, my bad. So I've interrupted you.
No, I think we've probably just got a little bit of lag there, mate. No worries. So I think just to kind of sum up what you said there as well, you kind of different to the motivation standpoint, of using technology and getting motivation from the athlete, different to providing instant feedback in terms of coaching and performance. I guess this third kind of anecdote, that little situation there that you've just explained, is more around, for me, there's certain literature in strength and conditioning and sports science, so one of the things that kind of jumps to my mind here is Isherin's residual training effects, so aerobic capacity lasts for 30 days plus or minus 5, whatever that is. And that's almost one of the things that we we think of as gospel, just because it's got, a wizard, an S&C wizard's name on it. We're like, okay, yeah, that's that. What I think you've kind of done there is you've proven it yourself. You've taken this idea of dose effect relationships and seeing whether something would work, and you've actually just applied it, and you've used it in your exact setting, your environment, so that you can use that and carry it through. And I like that, because I'm always a little bit skeptical of these big recommendations around like Verkhoshansky and those types of things, because I don't know how they've how they've got to that conclusion. So I really like that you've just basically done it in your scenario, and you've got a result, and you'll use that. Obviously, if you're still there, no doubt you'd probably still be refining that over time. So yeah, that was nice, mate. That was good that was kind of one of the things that I got from that. Would that sum it up, do you think?
I think so, yeah. I think so. Like, for me, it's probably just being curious and trying to question a lot of the things you do. And yeah, that example you've used about those residual training effects, like, it's something we just assume, isn't it? Like, and I can't think of any on the spot, but there's plenty of assumptions we use day to day, and I think that I think it's important to like kind of keep questioning the stuff. And what we're quite lucky to have is the tech to do it. So sometimes, like, Daniel will ask a question, and we've been able to get a little bit closer to the answer by the afternoon, just from simply getting a few bands out, from getting gym aware out, things like that. And we might just mess around for an hour, and sometimes off the back of a little like experiment or case study or something like that, we might bin an idea, or we might like go and explore it a little bit further.
Nice. So moving on a little bit from that, then I want to talk around like lab coat syndrome. So lab coat syndrome to me is like, I think it's based on literally you're getting some patients and they're in a room and you ask them how they're feeling. Okay, there's nobody around and they're feeling, yeah, I'm great. Okay, as soon as they get a doctor with a lab coat or a scientist comes in, they're like, fuck, I'm sweating, and they change their behavior. So lab coat syndrome, or the lab coat effect in regards to technology then is I've definitely seen scenarios. I've spent a lot of time with like timing gates and sprints and change direction. Is, I might be doing a sprint session with a team and they're just running beautifully. Like, they're running really, really nice, really smooth, really, really relaxed, really, really fast. As soon as you get the timing gates out, it's like everyone turns into a robot. Everyone's like, they're either mega stiff, they're anxious, they're trying almost too hard, which results in a worse performance in that sense. Have you come across that with your use of technology, or is it something that your boxers and your footballers have always been accustomed to?
Yeah, I think that I tried to do away with testing as such. Like, I'm not a massive fan unless I'm meeting someone for the first time, and we don't really do it as such. But we'll do a testing session, whether you want to call that screening, people call it strength diagnostics, whatever. Like, I'm not a massive fan of doing that with athletes that you see on a really regular basis, because one of the things that's kind of put me off was, well, I had a player tested 6 times in the 2 years that we had it, and I caught her on a bad day on 4 of those times. So I caught her on a bad day of 4. So I really couldn't use that data for whatever reason. And I'd imagine that it's probably like that lab coat syndrome. Like you've said, what I think is a better thing to look at is if we think something's important, I think we should be testing it not every day, but on a really, really regular basis at regular intervals. So for us, for boxers, we see, I think it's an R squared value of 0.67 between counter movement jump height and landmine punch throw peak velocity. So for us, one of our KPIs is counter movement jump height, and that's not to say that the whole program's about jumping higher. There's more to it than that, but we can be pretty confident that over time, if someone's jump height's improving, that their prerequisite physical qualities towards punching force are hopefully improving as well. Now, on that, for me, I think we should be testing it on a really regular basis. That's something that we do. So I wouldn't look to test that boxer on fight week or the week before fight week, or what I'd look to do would be to look at, right, what is the best score you've got across the last 2 weeks versus the 2 weeks prior to that versus the 2 weeks prior to that. One of the things that I did with the United lot, I'd look at, right, what's the best score you've got on your counter movement jump height at any point during our power session in across the last 4 weeks. What's the fastest you've ran across the last 4 weeks? And I think that really did away with that white coat syndrome, because at that point, testing becomes training, training becomes testing at the same time. And like I say, if something's important to us and it is a KPI, then we need to be not only training it on a regular basis, but looking at it on a really regular basis as well. Because if I'm going to catch someone on a bad day, I can't use that data to inform the next 4 weeks of the program. However, if I've got someone that's like, all right, across the last 4 weeks, you're no quicker than the 4 weeks prior. Well, what do we need to do? The current program's probably it's probably maintaining you, but it might not be moving the needle on it. So with that, that informs our program. And to me, like, all the time we need to, so we've looked at that maybe like twice a week or once a week, whatever. If we're doing our maximal speed sessions, we might have looked at counter movement jump twice a week, but then we don't look at it day to day. But then we'll take a zoom that we will look at it day to day, but we probably won't make decisions on it day to day. But then we'll take a zoomed out view and looking at sort of a long-term adaptation and things like that. For me, like, not to get all thingy, but we have to justify, like, what are our programs effective? And after every single block we do with an athlete, for me, I think we've got to say, was the program effective? And I don't just have to identify my program choice as effective, but as the most effective way of achieving the outcome that I wanted, that allows them to excel to the best of their tactical ability. And to me, every single time we write a program, we've got to say, could a different program have achieved greater success? So if I've trackboard someone for the past 4 weeks and their counter movement jump hasn't gone up like this, like rubbish example, like, but would it have been better to do trackball with bands, or would it have been better to back squat? And obviously we can't. All we do is like progress, refine, monitor all this stuff. But where we want to get to is using technology and things like that to design a completely optimal solution for every single athlete and make a completely optimal decision for, in this moment in time, in this week, in this month, across the next 6 weeks, what we work on. So identifying the absolute most optimal solution. And we're never going to get there. There's always going to be a better way of doing things. We'll always go, look, we should have done this instead, and we could have always done things better, but we need to pursue that. And it's the pursuit of that what drives what we're doing, I think.
It's really interesting what you said there, mate, around like choosing your times to test. And I think that's super important as well. You know, you saying you might have put a 6-week program in place. You tested them at the beginning. Maybe they was an absolute superhero on that day. You know, you put this training program in place, you test them at the end, and maybe they're having a shit day. They didn't sleep well, cognitive loads all over the place. They didn't eat enough the night before, those types of things. And you've seen a decline. And it's not to show that the whole thing is a decline. Over the average, if you recorded regularly, potentially they'd be up, you know, and it's like the more data points is definitely better. And I think it's just kind of assessing what is a worthwhile data point to collect, whether it literally is, like you said, velocity, jump height, how you feel, body weight, you know, your strength numbers, all those things can be used to assess. And that's, I think for me, mate, one of the simplest ones that I use on a regular basis is just looking at the program. You know, like I do use pretty much an auto-regulatory approach to programming. You know, I give them an aim. Okay, I want this session to be either this RPE, this kind of feel, and see if it trends up over time. Might not be the most scientific thing in the world. It's definitely not, but you know, it works. And also just kind of building off that as well. I think, like you said, they're probably not testing somebody the day or the week before a fight or the 2 weeks before a fight, because that can get in somebody's head. That can be really kind of, I've done it, I've made that mistake of thinking, this is going to be the best, the best time. This is where their adaptations and the physicality is going to be through the roof. I'm going to test them there. But if they are having a bad day and they are lower, it can wreck somebody, particularly, if it's very skill dominated sport. A lot of sports are, but something that is really kind of shifted towards that skill continuum instead of physical, it can get in their head. But, like you said, it's just about using that information to feed into your coaching process and your programming over the long term. So I guess my final kind of question to you there is, obviously you've been lucky enough, I've been lucky enough to be in situations where we've had, really expensive equipment. We've had opto jumps, gym aware, push bands, those types of things. Given that you need money, expertise, time, all those things available for the athletes out there that potentially don't have those things, what would kind of be your coach's tips in terms of, okay, you need to save up and invest in this because it's going to be really worthwhile? Or have you got any kind of workarounds to kind of replace that technology piece?
I don't think anything's indispensable. I don't think anything we use, if it didn't work, I don't think anything's indispensable for us. And like, I've never asked an athlete to buy something. And that's, I'm a bit tight. Some of my mates will say that, but I've never asked an athlete to buy something. The reason is, I think if you want it, like if you want it, you'll probably find a way to get it. If not, you'll find a different way. So going back before, like, I read this a while back, but doing the best you can with what we have at any moment in time, like that's really key for me. So like, we've had timing gates at points, and then we've done without them, but we still need to get max speed done today. So right, fortunately today it's the stopwatch. We've had, someone's took the iPad at work, someone's got the iPad or whatever. Like, we've not got gym wear today, we need push band or things like that. If I've not got the push band today, all I want you to do is just lift it as fast as we can, as if we had it there. My only non-negotiable would be intent and measurement, because I think that these are, obviously there's a big thing around like intent drives adaptation, but measuring what you're doing validates whether it's working or not. If you measure it on a really regular basis, you can see that, is it working? Is what I'm doing in this moment in time working? And do I need to do more of it or less of it, or do I need to change something? So for me, like, a stopwatch, a tape measure, and a notepad, magic. Because even for me, if I had no equipment, and we've done this with a group of youth footballers like fairly recently, but we were looking at broad jumps versus our standing triple jumps, and like, I think that we've found that. So I think there's if you look at the NFL combined data over the past like 3 or 4 years, there's about a 0.74 R² value. So a strong to very strong correlation between counter movement jump height and broad jump distance. So like, and we can probably infer and conclude that like hip extension force is a really big contributor to all things like that. But either way, we're getting a good idea. I would be confident that if my broad jump improves, my vertical impulse during a counter movement jump would improve as well. So in a training program where someone's not got access to an opti jump, I'd probably lean towards doing a broad jump, even if it's slightly different to. There are some drawbacks to a broad jump potentially, like, and mechanically it might not look like identical. It's probably even slightly easier to butcher technically. However, if I'm like, right, get your tape measure out, or put something down, or put a cone down, try and jump as far as you can, and then try and beat it. We can be doing that, and the intent we get from that probably outweighs the mechanics in terms of driving after our adaptation, which might be hip extension force, whatever. If I've got someone who's a good broad jumper, but not a very good standing triple jumper, I'd be pretty confident, not 100% confident, but I'd be pretty confident and I feel like I'm doing the best I can, that they need to work on more elastic, stiffness, RSI, sort of those sort of qualities. Where if someone's a good standing triple jumper, and these things, they're quite low technical demand. I've had people doing these really, really quickly. Like, we all know how to hop and skip about and things like that. We do it at school and stuff. Like, if I've got someone that's good standing triple jumper but not a great broad jumper, then I'd be pretty confident, right, you need to work on your broad jump. So even in itself, like, I heard someone say this over weeks, so I'm probably repeating it, but the test becomes the exercise, and the test becomes the intervention as well. If I've not, I would always time sprint as well. If I'm working on my speed, I'd get someone to time me. I'd find a way of measuring time myself, whether that's using my iPhone camera and putting sticks out or something like that, just to drive that intent and give yourself some feedback. And like I said before, right, let's say a 30-meter fly with a typical error of measurement of 0.04. So that's probably about maybe like just over a 1% measurement error, which isn't too much. So like, let's say a 30-meter fly, you've just run 3.42 and making numbers right. That was better than your last one. What went well there? Right, do that again. And timing yourself and giving yourself some feedback, and I think that's really important as well. So I think the only, nothing's indispensable, and I've done some of my most enjoyable program with some technology, and like I mentioned, the gym aware and things like that. Then I've done some of my most enjoyable programming, and I feel like some of my best decision making as a coach without any technology whatsoever. But stopwatch, tape measure, RPE, duration, if you've got it, if you don't really need much to have them things and those things, and I think you can do a really make 85-90% of the most optimal decision with very, very little equipment. And it might, sometimes it's a little bit more time consuming, but as long as you're doing the best you have with what you've got, that is the most optimal program, because you're using what you've got, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Like, it's context dependent, everything, I think what you just kind of did there, which I liked, is you've talked around some of the gold standard tests around like the NFL, and you've kind of backpedaled a little bit, and you've just knocked it down to your context over time. And like you just said, okay, not doing a CMJ is not doing a CMJ at the end of the day. But if we can compare that to something we know is correlated really well, like a broad jump, we can at least know whether we're having an impact on CMJ by doing that. It might not be perfect, but as human beings, we're not perfect anyway. And same again with what you said around the broad jump versus the repeated. You're basically building a little bit of context. You're getting some descriptions around what is happening with this athlete. What is their story? How can I change it slightly? So I think that's really cool. I think some of the things I've kind of come across, particularly around lockdown, is looking at some of the ways that you can do things on a budget, and doing things either super cheap or just without any money. And some of the ones you kind of listed there, I think a tape measure is awesome, because you've got that broad jump measure. Okay. It might not be perfect, but I think if you can broad jump a big distance, you're probably going to be a pretty good accelerator, at least from a physical standpoint. You might not have the technical ability, the rhythm and all those things, but we can work on that. So broad jump for me, it's a really nice one. The second one, just to kind of build on that, is if you're seeing them in person, you'll have this, but I tend to record using your phone or your iPad sprints all the time, because it allows you to look at things and be like, okay, technically we can improve that, your knee height, your dorsiflexion, whatever that thing is. And then using the subjective data, how did that rep feel? Okay. I think that's awesome. So I think cameras are a game changer. I think in terms of actually testing, I know there are some apps out there that are really cheap. So My Jump, we've mentioned that. So My Jump 2, I think it's a tenner. It's a one-off payment, get it on iPhone or Android. And from that, you can measure your counter movement jump. You can measure your reactive strength index, which are two really big ones that are kind of assessed quite a lot in literature as well. I've actually stepped away from using that, as you have a broad jump measure on My Jump 2. So you can measure your broad jump. The problem that I found with that is it uses your your height as the comparison between how far you jump.
Right.
So, you basically get the person to stand in front of the camera and you say, okay, right, I'm going to put the point on the top of the head and then at the feet. But if they're slumped over a little bit or the angles are a little bit wrong, I know that I'm 2 meters tall. Okay. If they've changed a little bit, that's now 198. Okay. So now when they actually jump and we use that as the guide, that's going to be off as well. So I use exactly what you said there. A tape measure is old but gold. I think it's perfect. Another one is resting heart rate. Resting heart rate for me is a really useful measure of whether somebody is aerobically fit or not. And I know you're going to have to apply this to your different sports. Like for your boxers, they might not have a resting heart rate above 52, but for average Joe that does a little bit of this and a little bit of that, 60 beats per minute is probably a really good gauge of whether we need to do a little bit extra. And that's just based off Joel Jamieson's work on conditioning. How much? So you guys I use Polar H10 most of the time for our conditioning based work. And that's not the cheapest though, is it? Is it Wahoo?
Yeah, we use Wahoo tickers. Like they're pretty bang on, and that's what we'd like kind of recommend out to people as well. Like we've not really spoke about using technology within conditioning, but it forms a sort of big part of our boxing science program. Heart rate data being used to sort of validate that we're going after the adaptation we want. So if we're working on, we want the detail. We're like, we want to improve someone's cardiac output or something, or improve their stroke volume. To do that, we want to be working at least above 85% max heart rate, if not 90%, and accumulating time and volume and sort of driving the intensity we can work at during that. Then heart rate is, to be fair, I've said that I've never sort of recommended technology, but that's probably the closest we'd get to recommending technology for an athlete. It would be like that validating that you're working towards a target in terms of your heart rate. We're also really lucky to have blood lactate as well. So blood lactate analysis, especially for our sort of muscle buffering work, that really validates that we're either going too hard or too gentle at different points in time. So we try and work roughly for most athletes between 10 and 12 millimole per litre of blood for blood lactate, and that's where sort of our muscle buffer enzymes they're buzzing at their sort of highest frequency and rate. So for us on that, we've pulled an athlete back within the session because their blood lactate's gone too high. We've driven them on a little bit, but to be honest, without that, I think we could do a pretty good job of estimating with RP, but not perfect. We definitely wouldn't be able to change it rep to rep. With heart rate, we can be pretty confident. We'd probably be slightly more confident in the work that we're doing if we wanted to go after that. But to be honest, if we didn't have blood lactate, we might lean towards a different way of either assessing or training that quality, I suppose. But yeah, I think Wahoo heart rate monitor that's out.
How much
providing
are they?
It's they're about 35 quid, I think.
Okay, so they're cheaper than Polar.
Yeah, I think so, to be fair. So, but they link up with all that. We use the Polar app and stuff. So, providing that is the quality we're going after, and we're confident that there's a dose and response relationship, like I said before, between the training and the intensity and the volume that we're giving someone, and the adaptation that they're going to incur and experience. That'd be the sort of aim for us.
That's awesome, mate. That's awesome. Sweet. I'm really conscious time, mate. I don't want to take up your whole day. I know you got some sunbathing. It looks bright out there. It looks wonderful. Where can people find you? Are you a social media guy? Where can people kind of head over and see what you do?
Yeah, I think I'm on Twitter at Tommy Munday 1. That's where I tweet about strength conditioning and stuff like that, and I've had some good conversations with people on Twitter. I think it's a really good platform. Instagram, I'm Munday, spelled Munday _ boxing science, and you can follow Danny Wilson _ boxing science, and then Alan Ruddock, and then Lee Rickards. You can follow all them as well. Like they post a lot more regularly than me, and they post a lot of really good interesting stuff as well. And then the other one is a sort of it is a project of ours, our mutual friend mine and Sam Farmers, which is Game Sharp _ performance. That's on Instagram as well. So that's where we put our more like football related content and things like that.
Sick. Awesome, mate. Cool. So I'll put all those in the show notes below, so people can just click through and just follow you for that. So, but I really appreciate your time today, Tommy. I think the insight you've been able to give from somebody that's an absolute brain in the industry, and somebody that's obviously had the coaching time to back that up and see where the juice is worth the squeeze has been really useful for me to hear as well. So I appreciate your time, mate. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks so much. Like I've not but to be honest, I'm only 3 years max out of uni as well. So take a lot of things of what I say with a pinch of salt. Like, who am I to sort of guess and measure and guess and think and know these things? But I'm just trying to sort of amalgamate as many sort of top coaches as I can, and try and test out their ideas. And obviously, like people like yourself, we talk on a fairly regular basis as well, and a lot of our ways of thinking, I think, seem to align and stuff like that as well. And hopefully, if I was to do this podcast again in say 4 years time or whatever, I'd probably come out with completely different stuff.
So we know we're progressing though, mate. I think, strong views, but loosely held.
Yeah.
So we're not against changing our mind if the evidence is there to support it. We're not
exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, that's awesome, mate. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me on, John. I really enjoyed it.